Very, very interesting, isn't it? And you guys as therapists know that if we don't resolve our childhood issues, we will marry the person that our subconscious thinks we can fix our childhood issues through.
Welcome to Tell Your Story, the podcast. We are your co-hosts, Jenny McIntyre, pastor and emotional intelligence coach, and Marybeth Stegenga, counselor and relationship coach. We believe that everyone has an extraordinary story to share. Together, we invite you to embark on a journey of self-discovery as we unravel the profound wisdom that lies in looking back to propel us forward. Prepare to be moved and inspired by tales of unwavering resilience, personal growth, and the pursuit of authentic living, including your own. Join us as we delve into the transformative power of storytelling. Because when you tell your story, you have the potential to change your life. And make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcast so you can be inspired. Welcome everybody to episode 1 of season 2 of the podcast. Unbelievable. Fireworks, please. Yes.
Yes, and applause.
Hooray.
We never thought we would get here, Jenny, but here we are, episode number 1 of season 2, and we're excited to spring forward and keep sharing stories.
Absolutely. And welcome to all our friends that are joining us, whether you are joining us via the podcast, YouTube, or in any of the other platforms where you find your podcast. Welcome. And thank you for being with us. Those of you that and if you haven't been with us from the beginning, you can certainly go back because you can see all the prior episodes. Season 1 was a foundational season, and we start with a quite an awesome season 2 where we get to invite each and every one of you to join us in our quest, in our journey to use our stories to heal. But before we introduce our very special friend for today, I want to reintroduce again counselor, relationship coach, and counselor Marybeth Stegenga. Wave, Marybeth. Yes. And Marybeth, are you there?
I'm here. Hello.
Okay. You're frozen because I did not see your wave. You were like completely frozen.
I'll wave again. Do you see it now? Okay.
Hi, Marybeth. And I am, of course, pastor and coach, Jenny McIntyre, emotional intelligence coach and therapist, joining you as the co-host of Tell Your Story podcast because we believe there is power in your story. And so thank you, Judy. Again, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
And for giving us the opportunity to use your story to practice more healing for you, but also for our audience, our listeners, to have the opportunity to see themselves through the mirror of your story and get an opportunity to find better ways to cope with their own trauma, difficulties, broken records, and rotten eggs, as we'd like to call it.
Yes.
Having said that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Marybeth, so you can welcome Judy too and get us started in this interview process.
All right. So like Jenny said, and everybody, I always look off. That's my joke is I always look off because I have to have my notes to the side. So as Jenny said, this is our very first live interview with a real live person. And so we're excited. And so bear with us as maybe we work out some of the kinks here of having a third person on the screen with us. And so, yes, welcome, Judy. Thank you again for sharing. And so just to refresh everybody's memory of how the framework works, we always want to talk about like some positive stories from our childhood and life and some negative stories, and then kind of how those have impacted us, what themes we can see that run throughout our lives. As a refresher, you know, I have the theme of loss. I have a lot of loss in my life. Jenny has a lot of trauma from her early childhood. And so we'll be interested to see what kind of themes Judy has. And I believe that we're going to call this episode Lights, Camera, Trauma. which is
Yep.
which is a pretty fun title for your story. So go ahead, Judy, if you would share with us, right off the story that you kind of started with Jenny and I, as you called it the bad news. So go ahead and
Yeah.
read some of that or share some of that story with us. That would be great.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to talk about this. And I was telling Mary Beth earlier that some of my story is so deeply compartmentalized that sometimes my pulse starts racing when I'm talking about it because I'm uncovering it, but I'm doing it because it needs to be done, and I'm hoping that it'll help other people. But if you've ever seen that show, Beverly Hills 90210, don't believe anything you see on the screen, because that is really not what's happening and what has happened to families growing up in Beverly Hills. So my dad was a staff physician for MGM Studios. My mom had a contract with the MGM Studios, and she was an international model. And she traveled around and was a model for several famous designers. But she didn't do very well as she got older. So she turned to alcohol and became more and more narcissistic. But basically, my life was one where I had to decide, if I wanted to get up and go to school, it was up to me to make sure that my alarm was set every day and that I got to the bus stop on time. Because if I didn't, I wasn't going to school, because usually my mother was hungover and sleeping in and so forth. And so I started putting my life together, at a pretty young age. But the downside is that there's no adults to teach adult skills. There's just the fear of not being able to get to school. But so anyway, there were some times where I was perseverating over why my alarm clock was going to go off, because if it didn't, I was going to be in big trouble. One day my mom said to me, do you know where your father is? And I said, well, I think he's at the hospital doing his rounds. And she said, well, no, actually we divorced. So, I was 6 or 7. So I didn't know what the proper response was. So I guess I went back to my coloring book or something. And I just don't know. But my mom did hire somebody who was my nanny, but she was also expected to, tidy up around the house. But my nanny is the one person that I can attribute everything good about me. Well, I contribute to my spiritual awakening, but also to this woman who loved me and took me on picnics and sang to me and would sit on the swing set and ask me to look in the sky to see different shapes in the clouds. And she also taught me how to pray. So she was from British Honduras, and she had her own family. She had her own children who were being raised by some other family members so she could live with us. And she made a tremendous sacrifice for us and for me.
So let me just briefly, so that we can frame what you're sharing with us using our framework, and that is that I can see specific events that we can classify for purposes of this program as fresh eggs. We like to call them fresh eggs and rotten eggs. And the fresh eggs, the positive events in your life, like the fact that you found this amazing person that your mom connected you with, that at her own personal sacrifice became your mentor and your coach.
She did.
Kind of like a quasi-maternal figure, right?
Oh, absolutely. No doubt.
And how old were you about, Judy, when you established this connection?
Well, this lady, who I'm going to call Catherine, she came to work for us when I was probably 5 or 6. And she stayed for many, many years, maybe 6 or 7 years.
That is amazing. So
Catherine, she shaped me.
So Catherine, definitely a fresh egg in your life,
yes.
a major life event that impacted you positively.
Yes.
And Marybeth, feel free to pitch in at any time. as rotten eggs, I can identify you've already used the phrase fear, Judy, the fear of having no one to take care of you other
Yes.
than yourself,
Yes.
right? That you needed to, I mean, I was thinking as I heard you, like, man, for so many kids, if they hear at face value, no one would make sure I was going to school. Many kids would just party, like, yay, no school. And
Yeah.
that may sound like that, but when you're actually living it, and you know you're supposed to be in school, and you know that unless you put yourself in a
Yeah.
situation to school, you're not making it.
Yeah.
That fear, right? The fear
Yeah.
of not having anybody to lean on, right?
Yes.
That's
Yes, exactly. I think that it was the consistency and the habit of doing something day after day that was so meaningful to me, because if I didn't do it, that the atmosphere in my home was chaos. You know, my mom was drinking and or hungover. And so I really needed to create a sense of structure to hang on to. So I'm very grateful that that's what I did.
Yeah, I was
that's
gonna
amazing.
say the other theme I'm hearing is chaos or instability, right? There was
Yeah.
without you were just like, if I don't do it, nobody's gonna do it.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's not when you think of being 5, 6, 7 years old, that's not really your job, right?
Yeah.
Your responsibility, but you had to do that in order to have some stability in your life.
Yeah.
And then talk about a traumatic event. I mean, we're obviously identifying traumatic events, but another huge is the divorce of your parents, which of
Yeah.
course added to your lack of stability, to that chaos, to that fear, is not only your parents getting divorced, but you finding out in such a haphazard way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So, the judge decreed that we should go to meaning my sister and I, she was my younger sister, we would go to be with my father on Wednesday nights for dinner and then on the weekends. And when my dad would pick me up, I would tell him, Dad, she's trying to beat me with a hairbrush. She's drunk. She's vomiting. And he would say, okay, that's it. I'm going to the judge. And he never did.
Mm.
Never. And every time I met with him, I told him things that were happening. He'd say, that's it. I'm going to the judge. And he never did it. So
Wow.
that's more isolation and loneliness and just being on my own and powerless.
Well, and almost like a broken promise, this adult who's supposed to protect you isn't and says he's going to,
Yeah.
but then doesn't. And
Yeah.
so again,
Yeah.
more stability in your life.
Yeah.
Judy, did you keep asking for help, or did it come a point where you said, what's the point, and you didn't tell your
Uh,
dad or what was going on, or did you kept at it? And
well, as we'll talk about later, I developed an eating disorder. So it was my only way to gain control was to monitor and be so stringent with my food. But when there was so much self-loathing, so the eating disorder contributes to the self-loathing, and the self-loathing contributes to the eating disorder, and so it just keeps going around in a circle.
it's a very vicious, toxic circle,
Yeah.
and that takes us to our next step. As a result of traumatic events in our lives, there are specific messages that those events, whether one-time events or repeated events, there are specific messages that we start believing about ourselves. For purposes of this program, we've called them broken records, and it's messages that repeat themselves over and over again. Like, Judy, you remember what a broken record sounded, right?
Of
Like,
course.
you go,
Of
every
course.
and you have to leave the needle, right? And move it.
Yeah.
So, in a lot of ways, Tell Your Story podcast is our attempt at lifting that needle and moving it. So those
Yeah.
broken
Yeah.
records don't continue repeating themselves. But I hear you going there as you tell your story. What are some of those messages, recurring negative messages, that those traumas or those big events that we've discussed told you about yourself or about life in general? Tell us about those.
Well, yeah, I believed that I was invisible, that I was really a bother and I was in the way, and I was too needy and too useless. I also believed that people couldn't be trusted.
And what about, did you have any, for, it's still a broken record because it repeats, but we can have positive core beliefs about ourselves too. Did you have any that came out, especially from your nanny, that helped you? Did you have any like core beliefs that came out from her
Well,
interaction?
yes. Well, she taught me that I had value and worth, and that I was deserving of love. Not because of anything I did, just because I existed. I was deserving of love.
Okay. And
So,
and so
yeah,
yeah, so keep going. So you were talking about now you developed this eating disorder, which was your way of I had no control as a child. This is a way now
yeah.
control. How long did that kind of play out in your life?
Well, when we talk about addiction, my perception of an eating disorder is similar to an addiction in that it responds the same way to the 12 steps of AA in terms of recovery, because recovering from an eating disorder is one of the most difficult of addictions to recover from, because we have to eat. We don't have to use cocaine, and snort heroin, all that kind of stuff, but we have to eat. So it's very difficult. But I did, before we left this one topic, I wanted to say that one day I came home from school and I said to my mom, "Where's Catherine?" And she said, "I fired her today." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because I found a spider web." And to this day, that's just one of those painful parts of me that I keep deeply, sequestered, because the pain was just unimaginable. So I went and threw myself on my bed, sobbed uncontrollably. There was no one there to console me. Sobbed, cried uncontrollably until I was done crying. And then I had to pick up and, get to school the next day and so forth. So that was a turning point for me. That's where I believed that people couldn't be trusted, especially my mom,
Wow.
especially my mom.
Let me just
So
validate how absolutely terrible that must have been for you, Judy. It's kind of like cutting your lifeline, right? Your one
yeah,
lifeline away
yeah.
from you. Were you able to stay in touch at all with Catherine, or was that it?
She never ever called me, but I understand why. First of all, this is back in the old days where there was one phone in the house, right?
Yep.
So for her to call me and talk to me and console me would have been, I can understand that she would have seen it as a violation against her employer, who was my mother. And she didn't, she wanted, I, I just believe that she decided it was best not to try to keep the relationship going with my mother right there.
Yeah.
And so I always felt since then a presence in my life, that she is a presence, and she's been a presence in my life since that day. And that's why I named my daughter after her.
Hmm.
She's always been part of my life, but I had no more contact with her.
Till this day,
Correct.
I'm so sorry.
I sent a Christmas card many, many years ago to an address that I had, and it came back undeliverable. So it's one of those losses. I guess Mary Beth might call this an ambiguous loss. I'm sure that Catherine has gone to be with Jesus, but I didn't get to say goodbye.
Yeah.
How terrible.
Yeah.
How
Terrible.
terrible.
Loss without any closure for sure. And
Yeah,
a little kid to process that and to not have an adult to help you process it. Yeah. Crazy. Crazy
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. So, but back, can we go back to the eating disorder?
Yeah. Talk about the eating disorder and how that played out in your life.
So, because my mom was an international fashion model, she decided at some point that my body shape was unacceptable. So she put me on diet pills, but I didn't know that it was a diet pill. I was in the fifth grade, and she probably told me it was a vitamin. So I went to school and I had a migraine. I've never had a migraine before in my life. It was unmanageable. And I went to the nurse because I said, "I'm very, very sick with a bad headache." And that's when I found out that my mother had put me on diet pills. So from there, I decided, I came to a deep inner knowing that there was something wrong with my body shape, that I was not able to ever get it right, that my fundamental way of being me and my fundamental way of choosing what foods was always all wrong. And so that's when I decided to starve myself. So anyway, I went to see one time my dad met me for breakfast and I was extremely lean. And his comment to me was, if you lose any more weight, I'm going to hospitalize you. So that was all the attention I was ever going to get from him. And I knew he was right. I knew that he would hospitalize me, but that would be all I would get. And that I'd have the shame of having been hospitalized and not gotten any emotional support. So I knew that starving myself probably was not going to work. So I started exercising. In my 20s, I started over exercising.
Well, again, with your trying to find control, right? I don't have any control as a little kid, and so I'm trying to control all the way into my 20s with all of these ways of,
Yeah. And I would say that I got a lot of affirmations from my mom whenever I was restricting about how fabulous I looked.
That further affirmed those broken records, right? Because you felt invisible, uncared for, unloved.
Yeah.
And you get involved in this kind of eating disorder and excess, right?
Yeah.
And you find a little bit of validation. Your dad says, if you keep going this way, I'm going to hospitalize you. And some attention, for someone that's suffering like you of parental neglect, some attention was better than no attention, right?
So fast forward a few years, you eventually meet someone and get married. And how is that kind of playing out in your, also who you chose to marry?
Yeah.
And how did some of your stuff play out in your relationship?
Well, very, very interesting, isn't it? And you guys as therapists know that if we don't resolve our childhood issues, we will marry the person that our subconscious thinks we can fix our childhood issues through. Yeah. Guaranteed. Guaranteed every time. There's no exception.
Yeah. Yep.
And so I married a man. I had a spiritual awakening. I became a Christian. I joined a small church here in Tucson, Arizona. I met a man there at church and we married. And he was like my father in that he overpromised and underdelivered. But there was more going on than that. He became a compulsive gambler. So when he inherited $500,000, he started gambling. And what I didn't understand was that he was going to work and doing a lot of business dealing, shady business dealing. But what he did was he lost our house in a bet. So what he did was I found this out much later. He stopped paying the mortgage because he thought the next win was right around the corner. And that's what all compulsive gamblers believe. The next win is right around the corner. So the next win wasn't around the corner. And a man knocked on my door and handed me a document telling me that I was trespassing on private property. And I didn't understand what that was about. And he said, well, my husband at the time said, we're going to have to meet with the pastor. So I was like, what is this about? Because my husband never wants to meet with the pastor. And in front of the pastor, he told me I stopped paying the mortgage. I lost the house many months ago. It's been foreclosed. We have 10 days to get out. And I just put my head back on the chair. I didn't have any words. I had no language for that. So the kids and I had to pack up. We had to get friends to come in and help us pack everything up. We had nowhere to go. This is how it catches in with my work with the homeless a little bit later. And so I was homeless with the kids. Some friends said we could sleep on their sofa, but we could only stay a month. And then we had to move to another sofa, only stay a month, and so forth. In the meantime, there was so much vomiting on my part, which now is called acute stress, that I had to go to the hospital because I couldn't stop vomiting. So unfortunately, the pastor of the church wrote me a letter when our marriage, when we were homeless, because my husband was tagging along with me while we were homeless, me and the kids. And he wrote me a letter saying, if you divorce your husband, we will not support you anymore here at this church. I didn't have any
Nothing like adding spiritual abuse to the mix, right?
Yeah. And
Oh my
I
God.
yeah. So I didn't have any choice. I was not going to go back to my abuser. Not. And so not only so I'm not going back to my abuser, and now I have no church family.
Hmm.
It's just very, very, very hard. And my
So
anxiety was high. Yeah.
did you I just keep thinking a loss is also a big part of your story, right? You have a ton of
Yeah.
loss, not
Yeah.
merely death loss, but just these
Yeah.
loss of relationship, loss of control, loss of finances. Um, so we talk about when you're ready to move forward, we all have to make kind of a decision, right? We say healing is a choice. So
Yes.
when did you make that choice, or how did you come to that realization? Like, I can't live, like, life is unmanageable. I've got,
Okay. Yeah. Well, let me just say that one of the gifts of sobriety, and I consider myself sober from compulsive eating now for 30 years. But one of the gifts of sobriety is to be able to transcend, um, difficult situations. So it is because the 12 steps of AA, and of course, I have a personal relationship with Jesus, but I also use the 12 steps of AA every day uh, to, stay, quote, sober from compulsive eating. But the bodybuilding, even though it was a mistaken attempt to try to maintain and moderate my food problem, it did teach me that there's nothing I cannot do if I put my mind to it. So at 48 years old, I went to graduate school because I couldn't stay married and I couldn't stay in that church and I didn't have a job. I'd been a stay-at-home mom my whole life. So I worked 3 jobs and went to graduate school full time.
You took control.
Yes, because because my life was out of control, and I was a ship afloat in the ocean with no compass. I didn't know where I was going, so I knew I didn't. If I didn't do something, I was going to end up selling lipstick at Walmart. I don't want to sell lipstick at Walmart.
Judy, how
So
do you go from, because Mary Beth and I have this illustration that we've used that I'm sure you've heard, right? You get hit by a car and you can stay in the middle of the road saying, woe is me. This is so
yeah,
unfair that this car has hit me. I did nothing to bring that upon myself.
yeah,
Or you can say, gee, this car hit me and this is very unfair, but let me get the heck out of the middle of the
yeah,
road before
yeah.
another car hits me again. How do you go from having been victimized as much as you were by your parents, your bringing, and eventually your husband and your pastor, and making the decision, I'm not staying down, I'm not going to just die and lose hope, I'm going to do something. How did you get, because we are now in our 7 steps to heal, and the first step to heal is decision time, because healing is a choice and you obviously chose to heal. How did you get to that point? What was your motivation to decide you
I so
needed to heal?
appreciate you. Thank you. This is pivotal. I had a mentor at that little church here in Tucson, Arizona, who sort of took the place of Catherine to me. She was very maternal. She knew my story. She was very loving, very kind. It really was sort of a reincarnation in some. I don't believe in reincarnation, but just another wonderful, supportive female who happened to be a licensed therapist who I'd been working with off and on over the years. And when all this came down, I got together with her and I said, I need you to help me walk through this. And so the first thing she did was she came to my beautiful home that I'd lived in with my family. And she said, let me walk through the house with you and stand with you in the doorway of every room in your home so you can say goodbye. So she went through the whole house with me and stood in the doorway. And I said goodbye to and when I was saying goodbye to my daughter's room, I was sobbing. And I was saying goodbye to my son's room, and I was sobbing. So I did all of that, walked through every house, every room in that beautiful house, and said goodbye to each. So invaluable to me. Then I went to her and I said, pardon me?
You
Grief.
grieved. She helped
Yes.
you grieve for what you
Oh
were
my God.
losing.
Wow. And then I said to her, I think I'm going to go to graduate school. And she said, how can I support you? I will write a letter for you. Whatever you need from me to get into graduate school, I will support you. And that's just what she did.
Okay, so
So,
you made that decision and you got on the path.
yeah.
So our next step in kind of our 7 steps to heal is establishing firm boundaries or throw away what's not helping.
Yeah.
And I can, see some of that. You did choose, although I don't want to say you threw away your husband, but you threw away a dysfunctional relationship and a dysfunctional church, and you set some boundaries, right? That was not helping you thrive and grow.
Well, the way I did that, Mary Beth, was I made an appointment with a therapist who I also knew, a different therapist who I also knew through this little church. And I said, I need to have a meeting and bring my husband in and tell him that I'm divorcing him. And he said, yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So my husband came in. I said, I'm divorcing you. And the therapist said to him, do you understand what your wife is saying? And he said, yes. He tried to play the victim. And I didn't have anything else to say. So that's when he knew that that we were divorcing. And then I somebody led me to someone who could help me legally write a divorce decree, bare bones. There was nothing left. It wasn't like we were going to share any money or anything. I had nothing.
Yeah.
I had to go on welfare.
How long have you been together, Judy?
I'm sorry?
How long had you been together?
20 years.
Was that very hard to let go of it or not?
Well, I can tell you, I firmly believe our bodies never lie. And so all that vomiting that I did that put me in the hospital when this first came down, my body was telling me, you cannot go on like this or you're going to die. So I just listened to my body and said, I can't do this to my own body. Even though my pastors think that being a submissive wife is the way to Christ, I'm sorry, I guess I'm going to have to live in a pup tent in the back 40 in heaven because I cannot stay.
Yeah. Okay, so
talk about boundaries. Very good.
Good boundaries. And then one of the other steps, which she's mentioned several times in the last few minutes, is a healthy support team. You did have some
I did.
who were in
I
your
did.
who were like, no, we're gonna, so you have a healthy support team. And I know that you're, a big believer in, from what I know of you, you we'll say CBT, right? It's the cognitive,
oh yeah,
right? Change your thoughts affect the way you feel. And so that's also part of our framework is how do you then identify those core beliefs that might pop up? How do you change them, right? How do you then embrace those and say like, oh no, that's not true. I need to make a change and speak truth.
Well, you bring up such a good point, Mary Beth. But let me just say that I have been remarried to the most wonderful man for 17 and a half years. My life is it's mind blowing how good my life is. But my husband says to me, he says things to me like, I bet you sort of have the attitude that nothing ever goes right for you. And I said to him, you know what? I do. I sort of have this thing that bubbles up that nothing ever goes my way. Nothing ever goes right for me. And that's such old stuff. It's so old, but it doesn't want to fall off the vine like an old, grape or something that just turns into a raisin and blows away. It's something I have to always look at. That why do I know why I have a core belief that nothing ever goes right for me, but I just have to be careful not to act on it.
Yeah.
And that is powerful because step number 4 is changing the way we speak or changing the way we listen, because I'm sure that filter or that distorted reality that you lived for so long, Judy, right?
Yeah,
Like we cannot blame you for thinking things don't go my way because for
yeah,
a lot of years
yeah,
they didn't, right?
yeah.
But how does that show up? And let's use your relationship with your current husband, right? And your new life for the last 17 years. How do those messages show up in your relationship? How do they impact it? Because we know that a byproduct of trauma is that we apply old records, all messages to current situations. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, if I've got this underlayer of nothing ever goes right for me, then when things come up, situations in which I'm unsure of the outcome, or something my husband's doing, maybe he's doing a house project and I don't know how it's going to come out, then I immediately flip over to a negative side, like, oh, that's going to go wrong, and that's going to go wrong, and that's not going to work out well, and this is all going to go to hell. And so I have to constantly, well, this is why I work my 12-step program, because my sobriety from compulsive eating has to do with me using my skills today, one day at a time, which is, the serenity prayer, to be able to control the things I can, let go of the things I can't control, which is sometimes a minute by minute thing. I've got to figure out, what am I in control of right now, and what am I not in control? And just because you're not in control of it doesn't mean it's going to turn out wrong.
Right. But it's that, and it's embracing that. I like to call it the being curious. Like when that pops up, it's like, why am I doing this? Oh, it's because of that.
Yes, exactly.
Have to switch and
Yeah,
fix that and fix.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I set boundaries. I had that session with the other therapist and my husband saying, I'm divorcing you. That was the first thing. The letter from the priest or the pastor saying you can't come back here. That was the second thing. I decided to divorce anyway. I went to graduate school. So I started pulling strengths from different areas and sort of trying to put them together until I had a plan for how I was going to go forward. And it worked, to my surprise. See, that's the old thinking right there. Hey, surprise, I did something that worked. That's the old stuff.
Yeah, that's the old stuff.
Beautiful.
That's the old stuff right there.
Any other major technique or step that you take to change the way you're perceiving life, to change the way you talk or change the way you listen or filter information? What other?
Well, I maybe Mary Beth can help me with this, but it does show up a lot in my counseling session, with sessions with people, because when they're as low as they think they can go, I always find, I call it sifting through an archaeological dig. So if you're going through an archaeological dig, you're pulling out the pieces that have meaning, the things you want to take with you, the things that aren't rubbish, they're valuable. So we pick out from the archaeological dig what matters, what's meaningful that we can take with us. And so that's what I do in my counseling sessions, is I help people find what's salvageable, that they can start putting their lives together now in a new and different way.
And so, and I know you mentioned too a couple of times, like the 12 steps is important to you. That is a way,
yes,
that is one of the ways that you are
yeah,
able to practice changing some of those things. And you
well,
the
that's
surrender
true.
prayer is also something that you use
Yes.
to help.
Plus I get to practice the 12 steps when I'm at the mission, because everybody there is getting sober from something, and they're all new to the 12 steps. And so they're being educated on what the 12 steps are, and how Jesus fits in, is not an adjacent component, but is the main component. And so I get to practice my program of sobriety in all its fullness with the people down there who are practicing getting sober.
Okay.
I love that. I love that, because one of the things that Marybeth and I established when we introduced this identify and practice 2 steps to stop reinforcing your broken records is that repetition makes perfect. And we said, we could talk about 15 steps or 16 steps, but we choose 2, because 2 steps allow you to repeat and do it again and repeat and do it and master, right? And it sounds to me like you have been involved in this mission for 12 or 13 years,
Yeah.
which allows you to constantly remind yourself things could have gotten worse, but they didn't,
Yes.
which
Yes.
means not everything goes south in my life. And number two, by practicing the serenity prayer, the 12 steps, and then reinforcing them through the work
Yeah.
that you do with others through
Yeah.
service, you've mastered these steps that have a direct impact in your ability or the way that you perceive life.
Yeah. Um, there's another element here, though. It's like God is saying to me, I know you went through that horrible, horrible time of being homeless and all that kind of stuff, but I have equipped you because of that. I have equipped you to work with a very specific demographic because you have gifts to minister to that demographic. And I'm going to be revealing the gifts to you as we go. So, and one of them is just when I walk onto the property, the female homeless gals, they're hugging me and they're telling me, guess what God did? And guess what? My liver's been healed. I was in stage 4 liver failure. Now God touched me and now I'm all better. And there's just all kinds of really good things that are coming out of all this brokenness. And it happened to me too.
That brings up to one of my favorite sayings that I sometimes will use when I'm working with people is God never wastes anything, right?
I
Nothing
agree.
in his economy. So he uses the hard stuff
I agree.
to bless others, to help us heal. It is something beautiful about the Christian walk is the hard stuff.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the perfect redeemer, right? He redeems
He is.
everything,
He
everything,
does.
everything. Now, moving us a little bit from this unbelievably and powerful part of your story, because it is, let's establish the point that although those steps help you and you've greatly overcome, lest we paint the wrong picture, I'm sure that those broken records rear their ugly heads once in a while
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
not always get it right. So we call this, I call it fail better, and Marybeth calls it suck less tomorrow. So Judy, if we could talk a little bit about when those broken records sometimes may take over, may impact the way you deal with situations or handle relationships. How do you handle failure, and how do you fail better or suck less tomorrow?
Well, I think CBT and some of the work that I did in my internship caused me to really be an observer of behavior. So when I'm doing something and I don't want to be doing it, let's say I'm going to the fridge or I'm looking in the pantry, right? That would be part of a relapse for me because since I'm in recovery from compulsive eating, then I would say to are you lonely? Are you thinking negatively about? So I always check my behavior to see what's going on with my mood.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I can't identify my mood right off the top, but I can always identify my mood by checking my behavior.
Well, Jenny
Yeah.
was looking at our 7 steps to move forward, and she's covered all of them without us even having to ask her about it, right? So, like, some of the steps are letting go of the past or grieving for what was not. She talked about standing in her house and saying goodbye. And grieving is important. And then you also talked about being grateful for what you do have.
Mm-hmm.
Your
Yeah.
relationship with your husband now of 17 years and how grateful
Yeah.
you are that. And now you just mentioned being curious, right? You're curious
Yeah.
about thoughts and actions. Why am I doing this? And I mean, a big part of your story is staying positive or persevering, right? You mentioned several times, like, I can do this. Like, I've done hard things in the past.
Yes. Yeah.
Continue to do hard things.
Yeah.
The one thing I want to ask you kind of about too is what about forgiveness? As far as with your mom and your dad and your ex-husband, and did you
Yeah.
that? Were you able to let go of that and do some forgiveness?
So each person that you mentioned has been handled differently. So with my mom, I think that working with the drunks and addicts at the mission has helped me understand the terrible burden that my mother carried in terms of her addiction to alcohol. So over time, I developed compassion for her. Regarding my ex-husband, who's still alive and he's living downtown in a lean-to, basically, he has nothing. Forgiveness sounds to me, and I don't know if you guys can agree that this is forgiveness, because it kind of sounds a little snarky, but I do say, I hope you have everything you've ever wanted. Whenever I think of him, I hope you got everything you ever wanted. Because he's a felon now and he has nothing and his wages are attached for the rest of his life and he has no car and he has to walk to work. He has nothing. But this is what he chose.
Yeah.
So, okay. It wasn't about me. He wanted something different than what I could provide, me and the kids. Okay. So I hope he has everything he's ever wanted. Regarding my...
And I think forgiveness is just refusing to allow that resentment to control your life, right? Like we're not like God yet. So we keep memories of traumatic events, right? But the key is, can I live my life without allowing that resentment?
Yes, exactly.
Beat me up and corrode who I am, right?
Yes.
And so it sounds to me like you still remember his poor choices, but you're not allowing that to control your life. You're not holding on to resentment to the point where it's stealing away from you.
Well, I agree with you. And I'll tell you, one of the principles of the 12-step program is resentment is the #1 cause for relapse. So if I'm going to harbor resentment, I'm going to end up taking it out on me. And I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
It's not worth it.
Not worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, because Jenny will often say it's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to sick and die, but it's you who suffer.
Yeah.
That is resentment for sure.
Yeah, sometimes we romanticize things, right? Like, oh, forgiveness is so good. You know, if the focusing on others don't work, then we need to say, you know what, I'm gonna forgive because it's not good for me.
Yeah.
Sometimes you've got to do what you got to do, and you use the angle that works for you. And in reality, forgiveness releases you.
I agree. And I also say that it's a path that I'm walking on. So every day I take another step on that path to forgiveness and self-forgiveness, I might add.
Yeah.
And it's a one day at a time thing. So I can't do it once and it's all done. I do it every day.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I like to say that too. Like forgiveness is a road that I'm on, not a line that I cross.
Yeah, that's right.
Love it.
Yeah. So, I mean, we could probably do 6 or 7 episodes on your story. There's a lot of other things, as with everybody, right? If we told all of our stories, we would all have novels. But I do thank you so much for coming on and being vulnerable. We talk about how important that is to be vulnerable because that's where the healing begins. And I know that your story is going to definitely bless some of our listeners, and they'll be able
I hope so.
to grab some nuggets that they can use to apply. I'm going to use your archaeological dig as to pull out the things that are of value and carry those with me and leave the garbage behind. That's a good analogy. Right. Well, thank you so much for
yes, thank you.
And we look forward to hearing updates on your story and see where God takes you next.
Yeah,
thank you.
And to our friends, make sure that you're dropping your comments. We read them all. And make sure that if you want your story featured, just as we are doing with Judy, we can blur your face, change your name. But join the movement where we use our story. We look back to propel us forward. And Judy, again, thank you so very much.
Thank you
for sharing your story with us. It's been a real blessing to us, I'm sure, to me and Marybeth, and to the rest of our audience. Thank you. And congratulations for being so brave and choosing to heal.
Thank you so much. God bless you both.
All right, we will see everybody on our next episode. Thanks.
Okay.
For us.
Thank you.